All right, so we are going to introduce our keynote speaker here. Tom DeWeese is one of the nation's leading advocates for individual liberty, free enterprise, private property rights, and American sovereignty and independence. He's a native of Ohio. He's been a candidate for the Ohio legislature, served as editor of 2 newspapers, and has owned several businesses. In 1989, Tom led the only privately funded election observation team to the Panamanian elections. In 2006, Tom was invited to the Cambridge University to debate the issue of the United Nations before the Cambridge Union, a 200-year-old debating society. Today he serves as founder and president of the American Policy Center and editor of the DeWeese Report and author of 3 books. Now tell me I was wrong. A Race, which is a fictional book and phenomenal. I read it in 2 days. And his most recent policy book entitled Sustainable, The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals. Put it together for Tom DeWeese.
Thank you. I want to tell you, you people are the strongest people I have ever come across. To stand here in the cold and the rain and stay here and stay so strong. We can absolutely suffer through the heat of communism and overthrow it anywhere they try to put it on us. We can stand through the rain today. So I want to tell you, for more than 30 years, I have been awarded tinfoil hats and labeled a conspiracy theorist and a hate monger because I was able to read between the lines of the UN's Agenda 21 and its plan for restructuring our society. The incredible thing is, all I've ever done is quote them, but they call me the nut. So, you know, that's how it goes. I've issued warnings that even the established Washington, D.C. based conservative movement there have ignored. So many conservative organizations in D.C. will not say the words Agenda 21. Then, last year, the global forces used a nitwit bartender to launch their Green New Deal. The Republican Party laughed. Mitch McConnell thought it was just hysterically funny that they had a vote in Congress. 57 to nothing. They didn't even vote for their own bill. Ha 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 ha. Right. Well, now I'm issuing a new warning. The global forces are working hard behind the scenes to develop a plan and to train a cadre of activists, elected officials, and their complicit news media to launch an all-out drive to impose the Green New Deal at every level of government, particularly focusing on your local community. First, let me make this very clear. The Green New Deal is Agenda 21. And most recently, they labeled it, of course, Agenda 2030. It's all the same thing. There is no difference. And if congressmen and congressional Republicans like Mitch McConnell and the national conservative leadership in Washington had listened, if they had listened to my warnings over all those years, they wouldn't be so surprised about what it is. That this all came together under Bill Clinton's administration, has been moving ever since. Instead, the Republicans were dumbfounded and amazed when Ocasio-Cortez suddenly laid down the gauntlet that now threatens to remove and replace the very system of government in our economy. So let's review, really quickly, I want to review what the new Green New Deal is. The Green Party, which is one of the big proponents of the Green New Deal, said the Green New Deal is a 4-part program for moving America quickly out of crisis into a secure, sustainable future. And they label it as 4 pillars: the Economic Bill of Rights, the Green Transition, real financial reform, and all these things that they call it a functioning democracy. And one of the interesting things they said was, one sentence in it says that just as we are replacing the old economy with a new one, We need to replace new politics to restore the promise of American democracy. America has never been a democracy. We are a republic. And in a republic, the rights of the individual, the rights of the minority are completely guaranteed and protected. In a democracy, it depends on what lynch mob is in charge to decide what they're going to lust after and what they're going to take from you. That's the difference between a democracy and a republic. 3 wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for lunch. So, this is their grand plan, to completely change our entire structure of government, taking away free enterprise, private property. You want a good example of what it's going to look like? Go to Seattle. That's what's going to happen to the entire country if the Green New Deal is put in place across the United States of America. So this is our grand plan. And its proponents insist that this is a plan to convert the entire country to renewable energy within 12 years, while also sparking a massive burst of job creation and technical innovation. Well, of course, congressional Republicans stated that the plan was dead on arrival, and it's not to be taken seriously. They've done nothing to oppose it. The Republicans in this country, from Congress to your state legislatures to your city councils, have done absolutely nothing to stand in the way of this and to stop it. Meanwhile, in lockstep, the progressive politicians are lining up behind this drastic plan to change the American system away from free markets, private property, and individual choice to top-down dictates to those who claim to have an environmental emergency. Well, they're using climate crisis. You know, always before, there were people who wanted to rule the world, and what they always did was they put armies together and they came in and killed people and broke things to conquer lands. These guys have figured out a way to get the people to stand with them, to voluntarily give up their rights, and to allow the Trojan horse to be pulled into the city walls to help them oppress themselves. I have had them tell me it doesn't matter how many rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. And so the American people and people all over the world are saying, well, okay, oh golly gee, that's what we've got to do. Climate crisis. There is no climate crisis. Don't you wish we had some global warming today? Jeez. Well, we have, in the state of Virginia, where I'm from, they have passed the Virginia Clean Economy Act. This is going to begin to drive to reduce the use of fossil fuels, and it's going to end up putting 850 wind turbines off the coast of Virginia Beach and Norfolk in Virginia. They will drive absolutely no power from these things, and what you're going to begin to find is when they begin to put this wind power in place and to go away with fossil fuels, you are going to have energy curfews at night. You won't have to be able to have lights on. You won't be able to have a third shift at factories. If you're living in the stack and pack high rises and you're on the top floor and you need to use the elevator at night to get home, forget it. That's what's going to happen. No energy, because wind power doesn't give you any energy. In California, they've passed the same kind of legislation to end the use of fossil fuels. New York City, same thing. On and on. Then they tell us we have a housing crisis. You know why we have a housing crisis in Portland, Oregon? Because they put a line around the city and they said no growth will take place outside of that line. We're going to have urban growth boundaries and everything's going to be inside. You know what happened in the last 20 years? The population grew by 80%. Now they have a housing crisis. It's not a housing crisis, it's a government crisis. The idiots in government continue to put these programs in place. So, this is how the Green New Deal is slowly creeping into every corner of our society to control how and where we live, the jobs that we have that exist, how we can eat, everything in our lives. Universal pay is the next thing they want to do. And now the power elite will prey on the poor and the homeless and determine how to finish this job. Their goal is to make all of us equal in the same chains, to assure none of us can disrupt their well-ordered utopian society. What we have coming together, ladies and gentlemen, is an army of non-governmental organizations that are now being trained to bring the Green New Deal into every single community in the nation. They are focusing on the local and the state governments. So it's not just a joke. You have to remember, the local level is where we have to fight back on this. Most recently, we've watched Nancy Pelosi and her team attempt to stack the emergency economic COVID legislation with major parts of the Green New Deal. Now, as this crisis begins to subside and people are looking forward to getting their lives back to normal, the forces behind the Green New Deal are preparing to push even harder to put it into law, especially at the local level. And while you and I have been hunkered down in our homes during this crisis, they have been using the time to form trade deal into place. Here's one of the headlines that came out of one of these emails that I had. The Green New Deal supporters urge world leaders to learn from the coronavirus to tackle climate change. Another one. The coronavirus pandemic makes what we've already known clear. We need a Green New Deal to stop climate change, provide desperately needed jobs, and halt future mass pandemics. Really? To halt future mass pandemics, we need to control climate change. Another one. They said, it's time to switch to Game B. Now this is when we've all been locked down. It's time to switch to Game B, a globally cooperative humanity worth its name. The plan has a name, the Green New Deal. This has been planned from day one. They've been putting this together. And of course, New York Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, the chief sponsor of the Green New Deal, is using the coronavirus panic to attack the property rights of landlords, saying people shouldn't be making money off of just owning property. Ladies and gentlemen, the way the American people have to build their own personal wealth is through private property ownership. That's something that is what made this country the wealthiest country in the world faster than any other country that ever tried it. We succeeded because of private property ownership. Now what we have happening is an attack on private property, and they say it's going to make us all equal, all equally poor. The governor of California said the coronavirus crisis is an opportunity to advance a more progressive agenda. An environmental activist and the Democratic candidate for the state Senate in Colorado said coronavirus has proved we can afford the Green New Deal. It is coming from every direction, everywhere. Everything they're throwing at us is all to put this agenda in place. The World Health Organization, you'll love this one. The World Economic Forum has urged governments to focus on a plan to, ready, flatten the climate curve. You see, they use everything. So, in the Club of Rome, one of the main people who authored the Agenda 21, they said they're calling for the green reboot after the pandemic. They're using the pandemic to put this thing in place, all the tactics. Be alert. Universal messages like this don't just happen by accident, and the Green New Deal was not written by a pathetic bartender from New York. These are marching orders. Now, the most dangerous details have been uncovered. I reported last year that the forces that got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and that so-called squad, you know the women I'm talking about, of the leftist congresswoman, got them all elected. They also helped create the Green New Deal. And George Soros-funded groups, including one called the Sunrise Movement, were behind those elections and behind the Green New Deal. Now, it has been learned that the Sunrise Movement is deeply involved in organizing the riots that have taken place across the country in these last couple of weeks. Less than 2 days after Floyd's murder, the Sunrise Movement was swinging into action, initiating already prepared plans and tactics. They didn't call it a protest, they call it a resistance. And they say that burning buildings and violence are legitimate resistance. They announced that their goal was to, quote, prepare for the Green New Deal or make way for leaders who will. That's a threat. The immediate target is your local government, and they have already trained another cadre of players to begin the assault through legislative means to make it laws in our community. They are preparing plans right now to force their agenda in state legislatures and city councils after this pandemic crisis passes, and they are determined to force the Green New Deal into every corner of our lives. Now, you and I have a huge job if we're going to restore American freedom and stop this leftist attack on our economy and our freedom. And I want to let you know that while most of this nation has been nearly paralyzed with the fear over the coronavirus, my organization, American Policy Center, has not been paralyzed. I have been preparing plans to move forward in our fight to stop the Green New Deal threat and that transition of our entire country. You and I must not back away from this fight. We must prepare to fight a huge battle to restore American freedom. That battle must be in the city council chambers and the county commissions across the country, and then into the state legislatures. To stop them, we must use our time wisely and now to prepare for these upcoming fights. So here's what we've done. We have spent a series of time preparing to put training webinars together. We have created a manual, the most comprehensive manual I think's ever been prepared for local grassroots activism to get involved at the local level, how to organize. I have people ask me all the time, I don't know what to do, how do we do this? And I understand that because it's intimidating to stand up and speak out. It's intimidating and it's confusing and it's fearful. If you have a business and speak out today, you could lose your license. If you stand up, you could lose your job. These are fears that people have, and I fully understand that. But if we don't stand up, we are going to lose this country. So we are putting this manual together, and we are going to have a series of webinars on how to use it, and I'm going to go across the country and train people how to come out and do this. This manual will have detailed instructions, documents, and a powerful legislation package that will cut the Green New Deal power grabs off at the knees. The legislative package was graciously prepared by Matt Shea. What we have is a series of 5 bills, and we're going to train legislators. Every single legislature in this country has a minority of good people. They are people who, they're always in the minority. They're with us. They want to fight for these things, but they are overrun everywhere they go by the other side. So they don't get anything accomplished. What we're going to train them to do is put together their own freedom lobby of their own 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 legislators. And they can work and network with the same kind of legislators in, let's say, 10 other states. In each of those states, they will have this package of bills that are particularly standing up for property rights, and they will introduce them at exactly the same time in every single state. And then they will have a news conference at exactly the same time in every state, and we will have activists trained how to support them. We will start a movement. As Matt says, you don't put it all in one bill, you put it in several bills, you pass one here, maybe you'll pass two over here, you start a movement. And that is what we're going to do. Friends, we've never had such a threat that's facing us. I have so many people that have come to me and they'll say, well, we tried to fight back, but it didn't do any good. What the left has done over decades is they have gone in and gotten a city councilman elected here, a mayor elected there, a county commissioner elected there, as a legislator. And you have seen now, after all this time and the diligence that they've put into it, what's gone on in the last couple of months. You've got radical governors, you've got radical mayors who are just reveling in their dictatorship now, and nobody challenges them, nobody stands up against them. And what do we say now? I don't know how to stop them, I don't know what we do. We have been asleep for 5 decades at least while they have put all this in place. Now here's what happens. You get all excited about something. I'm not talking about you guys. I'm talking about really most Americans out there. You guys know what you're doing. You've been out there on the front lines. But most people go in there. Let's say you get 100 people to show up at a city council meeting, and you go in and protest something happening. You know what happens? Nothing. They don't pay any attention to you. You go home. Here's what people tell me. Well, we tried that. We had 100 people there and nothing happened, so it doesn't work. I always ask this question. What did you do the next day? Yeah. Well, it didn't work. We didn't do anything. This is where we lose it. They're sitting there looking at their watch saying, okay, they're gone. Now, let's move on. We have got to stay in the battlefield. That is what we're going to train people to do, and keep making them feel pain for their actions. We are working on a legal thing, a legal activity. I haven't got it quite together yet, but this is designed to make them feel personally responsible for their actions. These are some of the things that we're working on. You know, it's just amazing, because as they have all those people in those city councils and so forth, and we go in there and we take our papers in and we take our actions into them, and we've let them put all these idiots in there, and we wonder why the idiots don't listen to us. The idiots have an agenda. We have to get that agenda. I cannot say that enough. We have to keep fighting, and we have to put it all together. So, let me just, in conclusion, just tell you this. If you feel hopeless, you feel it can't be done. Just before World War II, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain negotiated with Adolf Hitler out of fear and weakness, pleading with the Nazi leader, please, please don't hurt us. Well, Hitler said okay, and he smiled, and he signed a worthless treaty that he had no intention of honoring, because he knew Chamberlain wouldn't have the guts to take action if he did break it. Chamberlain gleefully announced to the British people that he had achieved peace in our time. Well, we all know how that worked out. Well, I'm sorry to say, that is exactly the tactic that many Republicans and conservative leaders have taken today. They try to counter by offering something more reasonable legislation. When they put the Green New Deal and brought it into Congress, what the Democrats did was a brilliant tactical move. They took the football and tossed it 10 miles down the road, and the Republicans are sitting there and they're looking at it going, well, this is kind of crazy. So what did they do? Lamar Alexander and several of the others in Congress said, well, we can offer something a little more reasonable than that. So they just moved the agenda way down the road, and the Republicans are saying, well, okay, well, just make it a little more reasonable. Can't we all just get along?
I can't believe the crowd just went.
Yeah. Well, incredibly, we have, as we've watched taking place over the last couple of years, look at all the videotape we've got of all of these things these crazy leftists have done, whether they're in, look, Nancy Pelosi and Schiff and all these guys. We've got all this stuff, all this documentation of what they've done, exposing their agenda and their stated plans. They openly say it. They do it all the time. They're not hiding anything.
Cool.
Their agenda is now naked and it's obscene. So, as Americans have never been, it's never been told to the American people of all these things that are happening, this horror, this agenda. And the Republicans are just sitting there on their hands saying, look at Mitch McConnell has a puzzled look on his face 24 hours a day. I start imitating him on radio shows, and I think I've got to stop doing that. But, like Neville Chamberlain, the Republican leadership hides behind meaningless tactics or no action at all. These videotapes should be used in a massive advertising attack ads, revealing the truth to the American people. There should be a determined plan underway to secure the ballot boxes in this country. We are about to see the greatest voter fraud of all time. And the Republicans are sitting there where everybody's talking about, well, we hope Mr. Trump could win again. We hope so. It ain't going to happen if we don't get control of the ballot box. There should never be a computerized voting machine anywhere. It should be on paper, and it should be accountable, and there should be people there watching every moment of that ballot. Early voting, mail-in voting, should never happen. The most sacred thing we have in this country is the ballot box. I was in Panama in 1989 as an election observer when Noriega stole the election there. And in Panama, they have a very unique way of doing things. You go in the voting booth and they have a trough. Every candidate has their own ballot. You go in and pull out each ballot that person you want to vote for, put that in the envelope, and put that in the ballot box. Noriega figured this out real quick. He didn't have delivered the opposition ballots. Now, we spent the whole day with the opposition candidates going around to polling places all over the country where they would walk in and say, please don't leave, we're trying to get the ballots there. In the end, not a single ballot was ever counted in that election. And the next day, I had the government newspaper, I was on the way to the airport to go home, I had the government newspaper that said, Noriega wins by 55%. Yeah. Voter fraud. They're experts at it. But
I could do that.
here we should have. We have races. Republicans aren't even putting candidates in races. Virginia lost its state legislature. Republicans lost their state legislature in Virginia last year. 20 races had no Republican winning in it. No, I mean running in it. No candidate running.
But it's been great.
And the Democrats took control, and it has been living hell ever since. None of this has been happening. If we could put the ballot box security there, run candidates, aggressive candidates in every race, we would wipe the Democrats out across this country at every level. City council, county commission, mayor, governorships, state legislatures. We would wipe them out. But they're not fighting. None of this is happening. And I want to tell you, there's so many people sitting back, Donald Trump could win, he's going to take care of it all. If we don't win the state legislatures and the city councils and the county commissions and both houses of Congress, Donald Trump won't get through his next inaugural address before they've thrown him out of office. We are asking this man to go up by himself and try to turn this around. It's not going to happen. We have the local elections are the most important in this country. We've got to do that. Set it up to make your own community a freedom pod, where in your community private properties are protected, where free enterprise is protected. You begin to make it a freedom pod, and it'll grow to the next community and the next, and we can start. Why is it a big job? Because we didn't do it for 50 years, that's why. Now we have to do it. So, well, let me tell you a different story. In July of 1863, a college professor from Maine found himself in command of the 20th Maine Regiment, and they were positioned at the end of the Union line on Little Round Top on the Gettysburg battlefield. If the enemy succeeded in turning this regiment, the entire Union line would collapse and perhaps the entire war would be lost. That college professor's name was Joshua Chamberlain. After several fierce assaults by the Confederates, the 20th Maine had run out of ammunition. And Chamberlain's men came in panic. They said, "What do we do?" Well, unlike Neville Chamberlain, Joshua Chamberlain ordered his men to charge. And with empty guns, they ran down the hill and routed the Confederate forces and won the day. We are being betrayed by our elected officials that have promised to defend our republic. If we are to save it, then we are the ones that have to take the action. Do not feel intimidated. Don't believe you can't make a difference, and don't believe you are out of ammunition. We have never had more ammunition in our lives. We've got more political weapons to fight with, and the fight must begin at the local level. I can't say it enough. It'll move up. Freedom's enemies believe it is now their time to set the final steps in place to fully impose their agenda. They don't think you will fight back. And that's for good reason, because we have been so ineffectively working on these things for so long. Instead, we stayed home and trusted our elected officials to stand up for us. But now, we know their game. There's no question what's at stake here. We know the players, and we know what we have to do to stop them from destroying our nation. So now, our own plan is beginning to take shape. It's cold. And we have a renewed spirit to drive us. The enemy has revealed itself right there in front of us. You know what you have to do. Prepare to plant freedom pods in your own community. And like Joshua Chamberlain, charge! Hoorah! Thank you very much.